Tadej Pogacar is the best rider in the world.
Yeah.
Best GC rider in the world. In all conditions, he's the best rider in the world. And when you have the best GC rider in the world and a very big budget, you are expected to win the Tour de France. And a few things happened. Trent and COVID. They can't control that. I think I said the UAE team isn't as strong, and so that will cost them in the first week because Jumbo will take advantage. And I was sort of wrong and sort of right. It did cost them because if you have a Stefan Kung level guy, if you have a Matteo Trentin level guy on your team, you're taking more than 13 seconds on stage 5. So the team wasn't strong enough to exploit Pogacar's biggest strengths, which is that he is a top 5 classics rider in the world. That's the problem. I think, what does he take with those? And again, Trentin got COVID, they can't control it, but Langen's the replacement. They don't have the depth. But this show, as always, is brought to you by Zwift. Whether you're just starting out on your cycling journey or looking for those final tune-ups ahead of a big event or race, Zwift is the online cycling platform that makes things fun, as well as being the named sponsor of the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift and this podcast. If you want to find out more about Zwift, the platform, the race, go to Zwift.com, and if you want to try it out, you can get a free 7-day trial. Like, how much time could he have taken on stage 5 if they went in with an attack mindset rather than a let's not lose the Tour mindset?
I think it's a significant amount. And it comes to the question I put on Twitter the other day. Let's say my question on Twitter was, what would happen in this Grand Tour if Pogacar was the leader of Ineos? And people were saying, oh, no difference, no difference. But I fought back, and I agree with stage 5. Because if on stage 5, Van Baarle is on the team of Pogacar, he takes more than a minute and a half on Vingegaard, who has that puncture and then has that beautiful panic in one picture moment with 5 riders by the side of the road by Jumbo. Still the funniest moment of this entire Tour de France, by the way. If he's at Ineos, for example, Pogacar, he has that support on the cobbles. He's got extra strength there, and he can gain significant time on that stage. So I think that's the vital difference here when it comes to the strength of his team. And also next to that, if he had a stronger team, well, on one end, you can say throughout the Grand Tour, UAE's team has been struck by a lot of bad luck, illness, riders that got injured riding up a climb like Micah, for example. That's something that happens, and you can't do anything about that. Exactly, Bennett COVID, stuff like that. Now, they get to the final week. Let's say they'll still have 5 or 6 riders, and it's an Almeida in there. It's stronger climbers. Then they can counter the satellite riders of a Jumbo team more. And because
not
they were
Almeida.
limited, that's true.
I slightly disagree, or I cut you off so you didn't get to finish your point. But the problems, the UAE climbing squad is really good. McNulty, Micah, Bennett got COVID, but he actually looked good on Morgin stage 9. I thought he was coming into some good shape. He did a long pull. He got COVID. I thought in mountains, they were covered. Soler medium mountains, Soler was good.
Yeah.
The problem, and I still think they should have taken Almeida. I can't believe they didn't. But the problem was break formation and the cobble stage. Basically, the team wasn't strong enough to stop Jumbo-Visma taking the piss. Like, Jumbo-Visma's like, we're going to get 2 riders in the break, and we're going to get Wout in the break, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's not Mark Hirschi's fault. Trentin got COVID. Hirschi, I think, had his own health issues. I can't believe the guy got through the Tour. So, chapeau to him for getting through the Tour. But, it's not his fault. But also, he couldn't contribute. He can't control the break of Laporte, Van Hooydonk, Wout, and Benoit. So the problem is the flat rouleurs, where they're missing a Bettiol, a Kung. They missed Trentin. They just didn't have that to stop Jumbo getting riders up the road or making it more difficult. And you're saying, Benji, they could have had riders go with those Jumbo guys. I think Denial would have been better. I think
agree.
Because Denial would have been better.
I completely agree with you. I was perhaps thinking a Formula could go up the road and so forth, but I agree it's not as simple as that. It's much easier to deny those riders to be in the break in the first place than to put a rider in there because you don't know how good your satellite rider is going to be compared to the others, for example. But I fully agree with your points on this case, and I think you are spotted well the 2 issues that UAE had in the all-encompassing Grand Tour that was the Tour de France, which is the brake formation control and also unable to take the opportunities where Pogacar is stronger than their competition, which is on the cobbles, for example.
And so I've been consuming a bit of Italian press and Spanish press. So we've done week one. We both think with a different team and approach, Pogacar can take big time in those sort of stages. And maybe then he doesn't need to have the team pace and spend a lot of energy on 9 and 10. We get to stage 11, though, for Pogacar. And I think, sorry if I'm misquoting, but I think Machin or Gianetti, said before the stage, their plan was not to react on Roglic. But maybe they didn't expect him to go as early. I think this tour would have been a lot closer if Pogacar doesn't react on Roglic. Now, is that hindsight, Benji? How can you not react to Roglic when it's Primož Roglic? How can you not react to him? I would argue there were a few indications publicly facing from Morgin and Mergev where he didn't look as good or wasn't sprinting. Maybe he could have been bluffing. But what do you think? Should Pogacar have reacted to the Roglic Vingegaard 8 1-2 1-2 1-2s?
Well, for the entertainment level of us viewers, it was amazing. Genuinely one of the best moments of this Grand Tour is the 1-2 attacks that followed. Should he have attacked or at least followed the attacks of Roglic on the Telegraph already? That's where I'm like, that's early. They've got Laporte in the break in that stage. They've got Van Aert in the break in that stage. I think it's still risky to have Roglic up the road, but I don't think it's as risky as spending all your energy trying to follow at that point in the race. You can use your team to try and keep the gap as close as possible and keep the energy for the latter part of the stage without having to go all out already. But the issue is, if Roglic is up the road, you get a similar effect. You get your team working until you have to work yourself. And when that occurs, then you're bringing Jonas up.
Just his team?
Or other teams could indeed come in. The third top 3 riders, for example, could start mingling them. But I think they would have forced UAE to eat their plate out first, I would dare to say. But I want to add something else. I think the bigger mistake in that stage was on the actual Galibier climb. So they do those 1-2 attacks, and I still don't really get why Pogacar kept riding to the top of the Galibier, because let's say he drops Jonas there, well, Van Aert's still ahead. He's just going to drop to Vingegaard, and he's going to try and bring Vingegaard back. Tell me.
I think he was very concerned about Van Aert being ahead. Mm-hmm. And you're right. Roglic was dropped on Galibier. And I agree, it is difficult to fully criticize in the moment after Telegraph. If you do map it out mathematically with Roglic 3 minutes back, assuming some help from other teams, Roglic would have had to do a 50-minute climb solo, descent with Wout, and then a 40-minute climb solo and take back 3 minutes, and then he's still level with you. I don't think he should have reacted. But Kruijswijk was pacing, steady pace. Roglic was dropped, and Pogacar attacked on Galibier. And I think that was to stop Jonas attacking to bridge across to Van Aert at that point. That was why he did it. Did he attack again? Bardet and Thomas came back and then he accelerated again? Or he even reacted on Bardet. Bardet attacked and he brought him back on top of Galibier. And listen, when I was watching it at the time, I was like, holy shit, this guy's unstoppable. He must feel so good. And I think he must have felt really good. But it obviously was a mistake. And then on Grenal, I also would say Rafael Majka was really, really strong on Grenal. Maybe we estimated 6 watts per kilo, 5.95 for close to 20 minutes. That's really hard pace. And it almost seemed I don't know, that was too hard, Benji. He dropped he dropped Koos immediately. He dropped Kruijswijk immediately. Why did he pace so hard? Surely Pogacar would have said, I don't feel it. Or maybe he didn't know.
I don't know. Was there a communication issue? Was it just suddenly that Pogacar was like, okay, I'm running M2 suddenly? There's always that possibility. We don't know that
you get
factor.
To 2000.
Yeah, possibly. We're not in that team car. We don't know about that factor, but it was seriously a decent pace because he basically brought Pogacar to a moment where he could not even respond to Vingegaard's move that actually happened. He instantly capitulated the second that Vingegaard made his move, while Maika tried to up the pace to try and close it, and that's what opened up the gap between Maika and Pogacar there. Like, do you think there's a different scenario where Pogacar drops earlier off the wheel of Vingegaard and keeps his own tempo with Maika and loses less time?
I don't know. I do wonder. I've been thinking about it a lot. The Wout going back for Roglic thing, where it looks like the way it played out was really preferable for Jumbo-Visma, because you go back, you collect a UA Domestique, who's the only guy stronger than Kuss and Kruijswijk to set that pace, and it almost cracks Pogacar, the Mica pace. But then I was thinking, okay, what if Wout had just kept hard pacing the group? As you say, Pogacar has less time to feed, much less time to feed and recover and restore glycogen and hydration. And then Jonas might have been forced to attack earlier, and maybe he takes even more time. That's what I've been thinking about. Impossible to know, but I think it was the Galibier. I don't think the Grenoble pace. I think it was the Galibier. I don't think Pogacar could have done too much differently once they got to Grenoble. Okay, so that was stage 11. Pogacar's now 2:20 behind. At that point, really, I have no idea what UA could do differently. I think they did the best they could, and Pogacar did the best they could. He put on a show and he attacked when he could. Like when he said, "I could, if I attack on Pogacar and Wout is ahead, it's pointless." Yeah, it's pointless. Like that's the problem. And with the little resources team they had, they did. It was fine, and he nearly won the Tour. Like Tadej Pogacar nearly won the Tour on stage 18. Let's not forget, he nearly won. Like he was a split second, 2 millimeters of tire contact away from winning the Tour de France. And that's why you always should keep trying, even on descents, even when you're not even the best descender, when you've got nothing to lose. Let's assume next year, Benji, we don't have Grenoble sort of stages. It's a more normal Tour de France parcours. I think Pogacar will be favourite. And let's assume that we have a couple of rainy days, and it's not 40 degrees. That's also, people don't realize it. The heat, it was extremely hot. All tour made a big difference, I think. What changes do you think they will make? What do you think they need in the team? And what approach do you think Pogacar should have for a normal tour parcours?
Well, let's first figure out the team and so forth. So we know that UAE's got youngsters in their town. They've got Ayuso, for example. I think that Ayuso was not meant to be riding the Vuelta in 2022. It's not announced yet whether he will. If he does that, then he might actually show up at the Tour de France next year. But if he doesn't ride any Grand Tour this year, then it's Vuelta time next year is my guess for Ayuso. So I would argue that it is unlikely at the moment that we'll see Ayuso in that Tour de France team next to Pogacar. I think Almeida is the likely one I do see next to the team, next to Pogacar at the Tour de France next year. And is that going to change a lot? I think it's a better climber. I hope they strengthen themselves when it comes to the flat ruler type riders, like you mentioned, the ones they need to control breakaways and to do cobble stages, for example. Although there likely won't be a cobble stage a year after another cobble stage. It's my guess in the Tour de France. But a rider like a Stuyven and so forth are the ones I'm looking at. I'm not even sure he's out of contract at this point.
Koon.
Yeah.
There's been whispers about trying to break the contract at FDJ. He has a clause apparently. UAE 2023, according to PCS, they only have 13 riders under contract. Climbing and medium mountain, they're good. Bennett, Almeida, he or she that's not unwell or underprepared. Soler, McNulty, they're good. Micah, I assume they will extend. Bjerg, I'm not sure he has the touch for Benji. For break formation. I know he's young, he's like 23, so it's unfair to compare him to Rowe, but like I watched a lot, and he's chasing breaks he doesn't need to, and that puts him under pressure then when the ones he needs to mark, like they just sort of snap closing everything. Yeah. And that really puts him under a lot of pressure. Alpecin also did that a little bit too. They don't quite have like the finesse of a de Klerk. Anyway, that was UAE and Pogacar's Tour de France. He won 3 stages, came second, and I mean, it wasn't a result he wanted, but yeah, I think a lot of learnings for next year.